Okay, so putting that aside, I want to move on to my next topic, which is a little bit more clinical and less cerebral. And that is, on my last show, I spoke about, the question was where a father was like, why should we avoid C-section? What is there to avoid about that? And I had a couple of questions come back to me in reference to that show, so I want to address them right now. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say, I wanted to make like a minor correction there. One of the things I said was that there are absolutely circumstances for which a C-section would be predetermined. You know, a doctor would say there's no other choice, this is what we have to do. And I gave a couple of examples, like a breech presentation. That, you know, I don't want to say unilaterally that you cannot deliver a breech positioned baby vaginally. There are some practices who will do it. I just know that in this part of the country, in the New York metropolitan area, whatever you want to call it, there are not that many practices, midwifery or OB, that are willing to deliver a breech presentation. So that's one thing. But I don't want to say that it's unheard of to do, because it does happen. Certainly doesn't happen by surprise anymore, but that's what it used to before the days of sonograms and so forth. The other thing I said was about twins. I know a lot of people who deliver twins vaginally. It's definitely not a setup for a C-section. However, you might be in a conservative practice with your OB where they're just not comfortable doing even attempting a vaginal twin delivery, so they go right to C-section. And part of the reason that happens really is kind of back to the positioning of the baby. While baby A may be head down, baby B may be in a different position. And the hope is that once baby A is born, baby B, now having a lot of room in that uterus, is going to reposition himself so that he's head down and moving through the pelvis that way. And actually, from all the women I know who have birthed twins vaginally, that's what happens. So it's totally not unlikely for that to happen. It's just there's still a risk that if that baby B doesn't move, then and doesn't go into position, then you're either delivering a breech unwittingly or you're doing an emergency C-section. So anyway, so I just wanted to put that out there and clarify that point, okay? So then the sort of second part of that question was where I explored at length why it's beneficial not to have a C-section. The one thing I did not address was, well, how do you avoid it? I mean, you know, apart from the obvious, which is going with a practice and or hospital that has a low cesarean rate. What can you do as a pregnant individual to try to avoid that fate, if that's what you want to do? And I think that the sort of common knowledge or understanding is that one of the best ways to avoid having a C-section is not to be induced. When women are artificially induced into labor, it sort of starts a cascade effect that frequently leads to C-section. Obviously, not all inductions lead down that road, but that is one of the sure... I have to be careful what I say here because there's nothing that is absolute, but we do know by statistics and research that being induced does lead to more C-sections than we need to see. And remember, if you didn't catch my show last time, and just I'm going to put that out once more to anyone who was following what I was saying, we have a very high C-section rate in this country, and it is the World Health Organization advises that 10% of all births are acceptable by C-section, and above that is really not necessary. So, you know, your practice may be like, oh yeah, we only have a 20% rate, and they may be bragging about that. But also look into the hospital, because that makes a big difference. Your doctor may be kind of on board with like, yeah, no, we definitely don't want to go down the C-section road if we don't have to. But you may show up at the hospital and their protocols that they put into place could lead you down that road. So you really have to weigh both things. So going back to how to avoid that cascade, the first thing I said was avoiding induction. One of the common reasons that women get induced is that they hit their due date and that's it. They're not given any latitude with that. And I really do find that disheartening because your due date is just a date. It doesn't mean that on that day that baby is absolutely ready to come out. I mean, babies come before their due dates all the time and are perfectly fine, and they come after their due dates and are perfectly fine. But we have gotten into this kind of weird trend here where anything above 40 weeks starts to become dangerous. And I don't think that that's true, and I'm sure there are plenty of practices, including midwifery practices, that don't believe that that is true. But many doctors don't want you to go past that the 40-week mark. So if you're not feeling that your doctor is going to give you any wiggle room on that, that can be, that can become an issue with your sort of communication with the practice, what your needs are, what you hope for and want, and what they go by their own protocol. So the 40-week due date point is it becomes a critical issue. I mean, that baby might be ready 3 days later. And would that have really made a big deal? It would make a big deal to you because then you could go into labor more naturally. The other thing that you want to avoid is going to the hospital too early. So that's another thing, and that's why it's important to take a birthing class. If you don't have any knowledge about how the birth process works, then at the first second you feel a contraction, you might be like, this is it, we got to rush to the hospital. When, that couldn't be farther from the truth. The very beginning of labor, which is called early labor, is, usually a little bit erratic. Your contractions kind of come and go, and they're far apart from each other. You might go through a lull where you don't feel any at all, then they may come back again. They may establish a rhythm and then go away. There are all sorts of things that can happen in early labor, and your best bet is to really stay home and rest and be comfortable. That's really all you have to do in early labor. Many doctors will say to you, don't come to the hospital until your contractions are, and they'll give you like a formula, 5 minutes apart and at least a minute in duration, something like that. And what they're essentially telling you is that you're now in the sort of mid stage, the active labor part, where it gets tougher and you want to be in a different setting at that point. So coming to the hospital early, what that does a lot of times is it sets up the cascade of interventions.